In these uncertain economic times, it's easy to be worried about protecting your wealth, your hard-earned savings, and your family's financial future. Plunging interest rates, the devaluating dollar, and political unrest constantly threaten what you have worked hard to earn and all that you own. That's why now it's more important than ever to protect your assets and have the money you need to make your dreams come true. Welcome to the Global Wealth Fortress Report with successful global entrepreneur and wealth preservation expert Joel Nagel. Joel's helped thousands of people just like you protect what you have so that you can make even more and make your every dream come true. So, sit back and enjoy Joel Nagel's offshore expert advice on how you can live the good life at a great price, where the sun never sets on your financial fortress.
Hello, hello, hello. This is Carib Carter Clues, and welcome to Joel Nagel's Global Wealth Fortress Report. The topic for today, I think, which is a burning topic, is the President Biden has submitted his $6 trillion budget with the largest tax increase on the wealthy in history. Joel Nagel, you're the let me get this right, the expert on asset protection. It's a tongue twister. What should people do with this new massive tax? Where are we going to go?
Hey, Carter, good to be with you as always. And it's a question of, first of all, will it get through? I mean, he positioned a very large tax cut last year. It never really went anywhere because he couldn't even get Democratic support, let alone Republican support. I suspect in an election year, it's not going to get through. It's to create campaign lines, right? Soak the rich is a very popular campaign slogan, and it's something they're putting out there. I think the tragedy, the thing that gets me more than anything else at the macro level, whether you're for more programs or less programs or conservative, liberal, one thing we should be able to agree on as a country and a people is that we should spend only what the government brings in.
Amen, and brother.
If you want to spend more, you gotta tax more. And if you don't like the taxes, okay, but then you got to spend less. Yes. Because we're seeing this, the way that they're bridging the gap is really just theft. They print money printing causes inflation. It causes the purchasing power of the dollar to go down. And, we're all left with feeling like, hey, I'm making more money than I did last year. But, does that extra money even keep you at the same place you were last year? I think a lot of middle-class Americans in particular, they're working harder and harder. I talk to people, they're working 2 jobs, they're, and they're cutting back on their quality of life. It's sad. They used to get, they used to have steaks on Friday, and then it was hamburgers, and then it was hot dogs, and now it's Spam. And, according to the government, those are fully interchangeable. So there's no inflation. But, if you want to buy the same steak that you bought 2 or 3 years ago, it's these numbers about 3%, 7% inflation. They're absolute hogwash. I mean, we're talking about, inflation rates of, in real terms, on the real things people need to buy that are, 20, 30% is at the minimum. And some things are hundreds of percent. It doesn't really matter what you look at. If you compare it to 2 years, 3 years, 4 years ago, it's massively more expensive. So, my take on all of these things is, first and foremost, let's talk about how to protect the money we have already, right? And I'm not talking about it from the perspective of a typical investment advisor, because most investment advisors will tell you need a portfolio of stocks and bonds and mutual funds and blah, blah, blah. And maybe your portfolio goes up 10%. That sounds great. The problem is if you're wedded to the dollar and your investments go up 10%, but the value of the dollar goes down 15%, then, on paper, you're further ahead, but in real purchasing power, you're further behind. And that's what a lot of Americans, they get up, work hard every day. They try to save, they try to invest, and they can't get anywhere because they're on this gerbil wheel that just keeps going around and around, and they're actually getting further and further behind. So when I look at trying to help people, we talk about purchasing power. How do you protect your purchasing power? What can I do to make sure the money I have today will be worth the same amount tomorrow and the next month, next year, and the year after? And we've talked about those things before. We could talk about them again today. You have a whole variety of tools, from conservative things like gold to more aggressive things like Bitcoin. And what they all have in common: real estate, good corporate securities. What they all have in common is governments don't print them. They can't print them out of thin air.
Yep.
I mean, if you own a share of Apple stock, there's a finite amount of Apple shares. And, if somebody wants to buy it from you next month, next year, they have to pay more. Same thing with an ounce of gold. Same thing with a great, lot wherever, whether it's in the mountains or the beach or wherever. There's, only so much land. They can't make more. Bitcoin, only 21 million coins will ever be, created. And so all of these things are designed to make sure, because of the finite nature of the asset, that they're not going to go down in value. They may up and down, in a short run. But if you measure 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, you'll find that you'll be able to keep up with this inflationary spiral that we're entering right now.
Well, it's in your inflationary spiral is right. I think gas is up 80%, 80% since Biden took office. 80%. Last weekend, my wife and I went up for the first time, because it's only opened when it begins to be open in April, to our vacation place in West Virginia, 2-hour drive. The gasoline was twice as much, cost twice as much. Well, that means we can only go to our vacation home. We used to, last summer, went every weekend. Well, there's no way. There's no way at those prices. And, for me, that's recreational. But what about the people who are going to work?
Yeah.
Who are trying to make a living, who have to drive to work? And nothing is being done to address this. Instead, we're going in the opposite direction. The Biden's sanction policy, which quite frankly is, a lot of major analysts are saying this is going to backfire so bad. Well, it's already backfired with the grain market up 166%. Joel, that hasn't even hit yet.
Yeah, exactly. Ukraine is one of the largest wheat exporters in the world, and their crop this year has been absolutely devastated. And if you lose 10% of world supply, it's not like prices are going to go up 10%, because everything trades on the margins. If you lose 10% of supply, demand's the same or increases, because we have an ever growing population in the world. You could see prices triple, quadruple, and that means when the average person goes to buy a loaf of bread, it's not going to be $2. It's going to be, $6, $8, $10. It's again, I've said this on your show before. I don't give high marks to politicians on either side of the aisle when it comes to economics. Basic. I would almost say there should be an economics 101 course required for somebody to run for political office, because if you don't really understand the levers of the economy, what causes inflation, what causes devaluation, if you don't understand those things, how can you really be making rules and laws to govern the country? And again, this whole bit about we'll just borrow, we'll just print. I mean, it's
insane.
It is. We're building our home on quicksand. It can't last.
No, and let me grab something here, because it's pretty stunning. Just reading Senator Marshall from Kansas, right? Now, they know a little bit about what happens when you can no longer get fertilizer. 15% of our fertilizer comes from Russia, who we have cut off now. I think that's known as cutting off your nose to spite your face. He told Fox News' Maria Bartiromo, I guess I'm pronouncing that at least close, this morning he expects a worldwide famine beginning next year. And I think that is absolutely viable. Absolutely viable. Nobody can afford a thing. And we just, like you said, the politicians, and again, I'm with you. This is not political. It's both sides of the aisle. You get this $6 billion budget, $6 trillion budget.
What's a few trillion amongst friends, Carter? I mean, people can't even grasp what that means. If you do the math and figure out what that means for every man, woman, and child in America, it's staggering. And the tax revenue, I think, is only about 50% of the budget. So that means we're just going to keep adding to the debt. Well, guess what? The Russians aren't buying our debt. The Chinese aren't buying our debt. And you're left with a few places around the world that want to buy the debt. And then the Federal Reserve ends up buying its own debt. So you have this circular thing. Well, what do? They print money to buy the debt, and they just keep interjecting more money into the system. And Jim Rickards gives a wonderful presentation about this, and he calls it the snowflake that causes the avalanche. You don't really know. You're out in the mountains and there's snow's piling up everywhere. You don't really know which snowflake causes the avalanche, but at some point it's going to happen, and you cannot just print money and think that there's not going to be a consequence. We have been able to kick the can down the road a very, very long time because we export a lot of our currency around the world to, I've said this before, to places that have even worse currencies. But we're feeling it at home now, and it's great to talk about sanctioning the Russians. I mean, I'm certainly not in favor of what they're doing in Ukraine, but yes, everything has consequences. They've ironically, Putin is a pretty smart guy, and when the sanctions kicked in, he said, okay, fine, but if you want my oil and gas, which the Europeans import about $600 million worth of oil and gas every day, so 800 million
a day.
So now he says, okay, well, you can only buy my oil and gas in rubles. Yeah. Because the ruble is sliding. So, why would they want to buy it in rubles? Well, the only place they can buy that many rubles is at the central bank of Russia. So they have to go to Russia, despite the sanctions, which is kind of the joke in all this, buy every day $800 million worth of rubles, which is now pushing the ruble back up to, its previous values. And then the government of Russia ends up with the rubles anyways, and I mean with the dollars anyways. It's actually having a boomerang effect on the Europeans and in the US. So it's not just oil and gas, like you say, it's going to be wheat. There's a lot of rare earths that come out of Russia and China that go into our electronics, our computers, our cell phones. We're a very interdependent world, and when you have shortages, regardless of what it is, the only way shortages play out is through price increases, and we're seeing price increases across the board. And I'll just make one other quick point. I've been in my business now for 33 years, Carter, and I can actually, for the first 32 and a half years, I don't ever remember a client coming to me and saying, hey, I want to move somewhere, and one of my most important criteria is the country has to be food self-sufficient.
There we go.
So, that's now on the radar, and people are saying, like, I don't want to go to a country, like some of the Caribbean countries, for example, they have to import everything. And, if there's supply chain problems, if there's inflation in the transport sector, which there is, it's all fuel driven, it's going to be very hard. Some of these countries are at the end of the food chain, and they're the first ones they're going to be, missing out. I'm talking to you today from Belize, and fortunately over the last 20 years, Belize has become a massive food exporter, largely because of the Mennonite population. We have a huge Mennonite population here. And, they all of central Belize is dominated by the Mennonites. They're very lovely, peaceful. If you want the safest place to live in Belize, go live out, in amongst the Mennonites, and produce cows and chickens and and grains, and they produce all of the food for Belize, and they export it to Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, even the United States. So when the what hits the fan, you probably want to be in a place like Belize where first of all the cost of living is so much lower than the U.S., but secondly, they do have a self-sufficiency when it comes to food.
And that's just vital. And even a poor country like Honduras is a food exporter, is a major food exporter at this point. Agriculture exporter, I should say. So,
Sure.
So I'm with you 100% that these are tremendous alternatives. And you mentioned the deficit that we spend more than we take in. On average, the American government takes in $2 trillion and spends $4 trillion. So Mr. Biden's solution to this is to add another $2 trillion onto the budget.
Yeah.
So, and then he says, but in 10 years, it's going to reduce the deficit.
I mean, it's like, you're in a giant pit and someone sends you a shovel and says, dig deeper and you'll get out. I mean, it doesn't work. I mean, we can print all we want, but we've seen through this conflict in Russia, Ukraine, that one lasting effect. Again, I mentioned Jim Rickards before. I saw his article today about the effect it'll have on the U.S. dollar, and it's only going to be something that further weakens. It might be more snowflakes that cause the avalanche, but the Russians are going away from the dollar. The Chinese are going away from the dollar. All of the countries that they interface with, like India, they're all moving to a system, using their own currencies and using a basket of metals and things like that. And our system, the dollar, which is supported by something called the SWIFT system, which is based in Belgium, it's basically the foundation of the Western economies. It's still the strongest. Don't get me wrong. Right. It's still the strongest, right. And it's causing punishment for Russia. It truly is. But, necessity is the mother of invention. And, those people aren't going to just shrivel up and die because we're putting, economic sanctions on them. They're developing their own system. And as they attract more and more countries, as other countries become, disillusioned with the US or the Europeans or whatever, you're going to see more attraction to that. And even if it ends up being just a competing system, we might still be the largest system, but it's going to take a bite out of our system. Going back to Putin's thing where you have to buy dollar or you have to buy rubles, the world oil and gas trade historically has been in dollars. So that means everybody in the world has to go out and get dollars so they can pay for oil and gas in dollars. Well, Russia now is saying, $800 million a day worth of dollars. Nope, that's not how it's going to work anymore. Chinese are saying the same thing. And, that was an artificial demand for dollars because, but if you think about it, why should a German, for example, even one of our allies, why should a German have to take their euros, convert them to dollars so they can go to Saudi Arabia and buy a barrel of oil?
Yes.
I mean, it's crazy. I mean, why can't the German just go to the Saudis and say, well, we'll pay you in euros? And I think, it truly is one of these examples of the emperor has no clothes. I mean, exactly. There's no backing to the dollar. We talked about that last week. If you had silver coins, from pre-1964, a gallon of gas is 20 cents. It's not $5, $6. So, the emperor has no clothes. Other people are going to figure that out. The US dollar will still be around, but it'll be competing with other systems. And, it's not going to be the 800-pound gorilla anymore. So what does that mean for the average American consumer? It means their dollar will be worth less. I mean,
the dollar will be worth less.
And if you invest in things, whatever they are, stocks and bonds and mutual funds and real estate, but they're in dollars, you may think you're getting ahead, but you may have more dollars. But like you say, if Biden's going to next year just out of a hat pull, 2, 3, 4 trillion extra dollars, economics 101 says as you print more, the value of each one goes down, and so that's what's happening. It's a theft. It's a nefarious theft that happens every day. It's a a drain that you can't put your finger on, but it's happening. And it's happening because the politicians don't understand economics. And in the short electoral cycle that we have, all they care about is getting reelected. Again, it doesn't matter which party. They want to get reelected, and increasing taxes isn't going to happen. The government has almost no assets to sell. So what's the alternative? Cutting spending. If the budget was $4 trillion last year, why not shoot for $3 trillion this year and cut a trillion out? But no, we're going to add $2 trillion. So the reality is the printing is happening, the devaluation is happening, inflation has already happened. We all see it. It's dangerously getting close to what's called hyperinflation. When you see inflation on inflation on inflation, when something that was $1 last month is $1.05 this month, $1.15 next month, $1.30 the month after. Well, that is, my friends, is the definition of hyperinflation. So, I think there's still time to plan. We talked about the steps to take, the types of assets to put some of your money in. Again, I'm not saying go out and put all your money in any of those things, but if you don't have exposure to those things and you're just sitting there in the dollar basket, you're going to be in for a hard time ahead. You're going to struggle and work harder and harder and harder, and your quality of life is going to go down, as opposed to coming to a region like this in Belize, where you can do the opposite. You can protect your assets the right way. Your purchasing power is intact. And if the dollar goes down in value, you'll actually benefit because you have non-dollars to deal with. So you will have more dollars. If you're sitting there with gold, if you're sitting there with Bitcoin, Bitcoin's been on a huge run. It's up, $10,000 a coin in just the last couple of weeks since the whole Ukraine thing started. Gold's up, 12% since the Ukraine invasion started. So, those are the types of things that are going to hold your purchasing power.
Hold the purchasing power. And I'm glad you mentioned the offshore, because the fact of the matter is that we talk about asset protection, but if you have assets, let's say that a person's assets are $2,000 to $3,000 a month and a fixed income. Social Security, I think, his average check is about $2,000 a month. Well, if you go to a country like Belize, Honduras, Guatemala, Nicaragua, that $2,000 over a 2-month period is as much as most people in those countries make in a year. So your spending power, your assets go much further. Agreed?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, if you're on a fixed income, you're making $2,000, $3,000 a month, your ability to save and invest is almost non-existent if you live in North America. So what are your options at that point? I think you hit the nail right on the head. It's to move to a place where that money is going to go further, where you're going to have a higher quality of life than what you can have, in the US. If you have Social Security income of $2,000 a month and you want to go live in South Florida, good luck with that. Maybe you can find a trailer park somewhere, but that's it. And you're going to have to decide whether you want to spend the rest of your money on food or medicine. Whereas you can go to a place like this. You can find nice places to live here and throughout Central America. That can be at $600, $800, $1,000, and you probably won't spend the rest of the money that you have on food and entertainment, which means now you can save, you can invest, you can put some money away for a rainy day. So I think obviously if you're younger and you still have longer before you want to go live somewhere else, then the key is to try to convert the dollars that you make every week, every month into something else, right? I always tell clients, whatever it is you earn, you're going to earn those next week, next month, next year too. So take whatever you earn. This isn't only about the dollar. I tell my European clients the same thing. I tell Asian clients the same thing. Whatever you earn, make your investments in something else, because your earnings you can replace. But if the purchasing power of your own currency goes down, you won't be able to replace the other assets. So it's good to sort of have multiple baskets. That's really what asset protection is all about.
It's great. That's great, Joel. And this advice today has just been sterling. It has been sterling. And folks, remember, you're hearing it from America's #1 asset protection attorney. So Joel, Thank you. This has been terrific. I think hopefully we've opened a lot of eyes and helped people protect a lot of assets today.
Yeah, I get a lot of notes from people who watch the show, and they're always very grateful. And that, that's the real reason I do it. I'm very happy to, just stir people's thoughts so that they're thinking about these things, because the worst thing that can happen is, you wake up like the poor people in Ukraine one day, or for whatever reason, whether it's war or hyperinflation or whatever, and then you find out, you don't even really have enough money to live. And that's got to be, particularly for older people, the most horrific, thing that you don't ever want to face. I would never want my parents or grandparents to have to be in that situation.
That's terrific. Remember what MacArthur said: the most ominous words in the world are too late. So don't wait till it's too late. So thank you, Joel. Thank you once again. This has been terrific. It's great seeing you again, and we'll see you next week on Global Wealth Fortress Report. Now I got it. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. And folks, great advice from the top asset protection attorney. Grab onto it, utilize it. We'll see you next week. Let's do this thing.